Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I am going to be talking about Loki Season 1, Episode 1. It is called Glorious Purpose. So, full spoilers for the episode. Well, actually, should I? Nah, still full spoiler. It's a weird thing, because it's a Marvel Cinematic Universe show. I feel like I have to talk about other movies and things that lead into this, and I don't know if doing spoiler-free really has much of a benefit. Everyone who's going to watch this is going to watch it regardless. You're probably here after watching it to see what I thought, rather than seeing if it's worth watching. So, yeah, this is kind of a bit of a dark horse, I guess, for me, as far as these Marvel shows go. Or at least that's what I would have said before any of them started. WandaVision looked interesting because it was weird. Falcon and Winter Soldier looked like it wasn't going to be anything special in terms of what it was as a genre or style of story. It looked like it was just going to be like a Marvel movie. Loki, of course, had the potential to be very weird because it is this time hopping out of reality time bureau investigation show. I think Matt on Twitter said it was a Booster Gold show, and I could kind of see why he'd say that actually in a lot of ways. So Loki, who picked up the Tesseract in Endgame when the Avengers went back in time, he warped out of reality, and it was really cynical in a way because you could kind of. I remember like we knew about the show, I think, before Endgame came out. Because I remember thinking in the theater that we had Loki, of course, in Infinity War had already died. So in Endgame, between the two movies, we find out Loki's going to get a TV show, and we're all like, wait, what? And one of the possibilities, of course, is that Endgame was going to like fix that or rewrite time, and obviously it didn't, because the whole point was that everything still happened. But we had this one moment where he picks up the Tesseract and just blinks out of existence, and it was like, oh, there you go. That's your door. That's your door to the TV show. Almost like so in your face. Just this one little moment, just to justify why we could have our TV show later on. Not to start this off in a negative note, because I actually thought this first episode was fairly solid. It was entertaining. I definitely like it more than I liked Falcon and Winter Soldier to start with. It's both weird, but not as weird conceptually as WandaVision. WandaVision, had that, it was almost going for the Lynchian, like, what the hell is going on here? Whereas this is weird in concept, but it's not weird in its execution. It doesn't try to, it tells us things. It even gives us an animated exposition short for Loki, and then in turn us to understand what this place is, what the sacred timeline is. It tries to justify why his escaping that and blinking away is a crime against the timeline, but everything the Avengers did in Endgame wasn't. Just go with it. It doesn't really matter, I guess. But that's there too. So they kind of try and do that all. It's funny because this first episode in a lot of ways has to set up, okay, what the show is going to be, why we should care, why we should be invested in watching it, but also trying to just kind of quickly deal with the fact that this Loki is not the Loki that died in Infinity War. He's the Loki that escaped right after the first Avengers. So he didn't have all that character growth. He didn't have the Thor Ragnarok and Infinity War growth. They didn't have those moments. And funnily enough, they kind of solved that in this episode by having Loki basically just watch those movies. It's the best and quick way to sum it up. He's showing memories from his past, from Avengers 1, but then once he gets his own hands on it, well, actually, Owen Wilson does show him a little bit of his mother's death from Thor: The Dark World, and then he goes on to watch stuff that comes later. He watches stuff from Ragnarok with Odin, fighting side by side with Thor, and then eventually, of course, his death by Thanos. And his reactions are very interesting to watch. It's definitely intriguing as far as the character beats goes. I both really like this, but also have a slight cynical viewpoint on it. On the one hand, it's all a bit easy. It's all a bit easy to get us to the point where this Loki isn't exactly the Loki we had by the time he died, but he's definitely a lot more sympathetic and closer to it than the Loki from the end of Avengers. And it wanted to kind of shortcut that a little bit so that we didn't have to regress with the character too much, which I do admit I think would be a bit of a problem for an audience. It'd be a problem for me, I think, because it just kind of feel like, oh, we've undone all of that character development, so now we're back to a slightly more evil Loki, and now we have to deal with that. He's not the exact same, of course. There's still going to be some differences, but at least this kind of gets us through the the most of it, the biggest hump of it, I suppose. It's one of those weird narrative corners that they've put themselves into, because they wanted to have this Loki show, but they wanted to have him to give his big death in Infinity War, which maybe does lead to a wider complaint about the MCU bringing characters back who die, and seemingly deciding to do so before they've even finished filming the scene where they die. Phil Coulson's even brought up in this very episode, and I'm not gonna lie, as a big Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fan, and as someone who thinks Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is one of the best things in the MCU, if not the best, and I realise that it's practically not in continuity anymore, but to not even acknowledge that Coulson came back was a little bit annoying. It was like, okay, alright, fine. We're just going to not say it, or we're not saying it, but we're not saying it. It just, it was like, come on. Come on. But hey, but I was interested in seeing Loki's reactions to these scenes. They're clearly having fun with the premise, which ultimately I know some people are going to say, stop caring about anything that I've already said, and just enjoy the fact that we've got a fun premise with Loki, who's going to effectively be a time cop, hunting another time variant, which is what they call these, like, you know, people who veer off the timeline. And we get the big reveal at the end that this variant that they're hunting, who is killing lots of the Minutemen, the time soldiers, it's another Loki of some kind. And they still hid the face at the end, which says that there is a reveal to be had there. My first thought is that it's going to just be an older version of this exact same Loki, and maybe he's got old age makeup on, maybe they've got an older actor or something. I did see a theory online that maybe it's a female Loki, because I think there was a female Loki in the comics at some point. That would be kind of interesting if that's the way, because they were still hiding the face at the end. If it was just another Loki that looked like Loki, why wouldn't they just show the face in that final scene where he's burning the Minutemen? So I would expect something there in terms of a reveal. But not the number one thing that makes this work is Hiddleston. It's the comedy of it all, really. It's the comedy of him dealing with the absurdity of this place, which is, how do I describe the tone of the TVA? It's obviously, it's got those like sort of government building kind of vibes, but with a sort of quirky tone. I saw some people compare the tone to Legion a little bit, and I can kind of see that. I'm trying to think of a better example. I'm sure there's movies that have a better one-to-one comparison for this. This kind of waiting in the empty lobby with the long queue, but there's no one there, but you hear the cheesy sort of like waiting music playing. Like, it's got a vibe. There's definitely a vibe. I will say the music is quite good. There's a few points in this episode where the music got very sci-fi, which I kind of dug. When he sees what the rest of this TVA city effectively looks like, or when he sees, even at the start when he's a little funny beat where he gives this speech about him ruling over everyone, but the locals who he's arrived to, I think it was Mongolia, don't understand him, so they're like, who are you? What did you say? But with subtitles, and he's like, never mind. But it's the funny moments, like when he sees the other guy get vaporized and he like pulls out his ticket because now he's like scared, and scared Loki's quite funny. I have to admit. I'm with. Pardon me. Sneezing going to happen. I got my first vaccination shot today, so I don't think that causes the sneeze, but I'm mentioning that. If I seem out of it, if I seem a little bit loopy, maybe that's why. But so Loki is entertaining. He's charming and he's funny. It's one of those things where there was times where it almost took over some of the movies, where it was almost like a detriment in a way, because it wanted to focus more on Loki being funny. The good thing about this show is that it's just a reason to have lots of Loki being funny. So we get Loki reacting to Owen Wilson's shtick, we get Loki being scared, trying to use his powers and it not working. The man has oodles of charisma. And of course, everyone's talking about the DB Cooper sequence, which we find out something that he did that was mischievous in the past. Apparently, after losing a bet to Thor, turned out Loki was DB Cooper, and the reason he was able to escape is that when he jumped off the plane at the end, he actually went up in the Bifrost. Which is a fun sequence. It's an excuse to have Tom Hiddleston just look like Tom Hiddleston in a suit, if nothing else. But credit to Best of the Worst here, because I'm pretty sure I only know the story of DB Cooper because of an episode of Best of the Worst. But I knew who it was. I got the cultural reference when it popped up in the scene. So fair play. But everyone's digging that. Yeah, I mean, credit to the episode that ultimately, like, after some setup, a lot of it takes place in one room. But most of what happens in there, most of Loki's reactions, Owen Wilson kind of calling him on his shit, Loki realizing that his, glorious purpose, the title of the episode, he believes it's to become a king, it's to rule over everyone, but he's effectively told that now your purpose is to be a little shit. To inspire others to be the best version of themselves, and that's when he shows the footage of the Avengers forming. So I like the moment that it kind of hits him, because he escapes and he gets to the guy who took the Tesseract off of him, which actually had the funniest line of the episode, I thought, was, "I'm going to gut you like a fish," only for this guy to go, "What's a fish?" I don't know, it's so random, but that really made me laugh. The comedy was on point for the most part of this episode, whereas with Falcon and Winter Soldier, I thought it was really hit and miss, like mostly missing. And maybe a lot of that is just Hiddleston's natural like delivery of a lot of this, but even the other characters were making me funny and making me laugh. See, I got my shot today. That's my excuse. Leave me alone. So yeah, that was good, and it's him seeing all these Infinity Stones in the drawer. Like, they have no power here, they have no meaning. These are all just from alternate timelines that weren't supposed to happen. So they've actually got a bunch of Infinity Stones that they just use as paperweights, much like the Thessalian Orb. I think I just made a cool reference, but I'm not 100% sure on the name. Thessalian Orb. I think it was a Thessalian Orb. So it's a reference to the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, in which this magical orb that people use to do magic rituals was also used as a paperweight by Giles. That was my reference. It was gold. It was great. Unless I got the name wrong, in which case it was flawed. But yes, so there's a lot of things I liked more as the episode went on. Because once Owen Wilson, who plays Mobius here, once he revealed that the variant, this murderous variant that they're hunting, once he revealed that was a Loki, it made so much more sense why he like saw potential in recruiting this Loki to help. It's like, oh, we can use himself. So that made a lot of sense to me from a narrative perspective. And if a lot of this show is going to be Loki kind of like coming to terms with who he is, why he's acted out the way he's acted out, what his purpose really is, fighting a villainous self, or a villainous version of himself, it seems like you can explore a lot of that character dynamic and a lot of that growth through that. You can use this wacky thing where he gets to actually confront himself, literally. So yeah, I'm fine with the premise. I'm down with it. What's funny is that I definitely think on paper I like WandaVision more, but WandaVision definitely went down a bit of a generic path at the end. Yeah, the final episode in particular was we're going to have a big fight in the sky, and there's going to be blasts of energy, and we're going to do really sort of normal tropey things at this point. So I hope this show doesn't go down that path. So we'll see. I mean, do I have any nitpicky things? Normally I complain when people have like security camera footage, or they have footage of an incident. I complain that they're just using footage from the movie it came from, and I'm like, wait, this just feels cheap to me because you're just using shots of the movie. This didn't come from anywhere. I'll forgive it here for the most part, because this is like another dimensional like time bureau who seemingly just have access to everything. So it didn't bother me too much until the wraparound shot of the Avengers, where it felt a bit too cinematic. I'm like, Why is this a rap? Why are we spinning around them like it's just, like it's a movie here? You know, when it was the first shot of the Avengers, when it was Loki looking up at them, I thought, oh, this is essentially his POV, so whatever, this is fine. But once you start getting to the more cinematic elements, it's like, well, why is this footage like who's editing this footage? Who is choosing the camera placement? And even though it is magical, and I believe they can get the footage, why is it edited like this, like the actual movie? I know it's a really weird nitpicky thing to bring up, but I'm always going to do it. I do it every time a movie tries to pull this shit, or a TV show, and I'm doing it here. The show, you'll notice that it actually plays with aspect ratios a little bit. The majority of the show is in the 2.35 or 2.4:1 aspect ratio. But it does it a couple of times, switch to something else. The cartoon that plays that explains the three time guardians or whatever their name is, that's like this 4:3 image. And then during the DB Cooper section, it actually opens up into full 16:9 at a certain point. Just pretty much just for the ending where he jumps out of the plane. So, you know, which is fine. I have no problem with them playing with aspect ratios. I will say, I don't necessarily like them using more of the screen. This is going to sound like a weird thing to say, right? Some people are going to critique this and like disagree with me, and I get that. But because the main aspect ratio is 2.35:1, I don't like that when it goes to 4:3 for the cartoon, that it uses the full height of the screen. To me, it should be 4:3 within the full frame of the show, which is the 2.35. So it actually opening up to use more of the screen is a slightly nitpicky thing that I would not make that choice. I would prefer it's within the region of what the format actually is, as opposed to opening up to more of the TV. And people are going to think I'm crazy for saying that. It's, you know, same thing. I prefer subtitles if I'm watching a foreign film. I want the subtitles on the image. I don't want them in the black bars. It's annoying. It takes me out of the image. The window I have of this world is that window. And when you have something outside of that or overlapping out into the black bar, that bugs me. Have it all within that window. I know I'm in super nitpicky territory here, but it occurred to me, so I'm mentioning it. But yeah, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by the show. I'm not necessarily convinced, much like a lot of these Marvel shows so far, I'm not convinced how much there's going to be to talk about episode to episode. All of them so far have felt quite light on stuff to actually analyze and discuss episode to episode. And I think part of that is because these are produced by Kevin Feige, because they're kind of treated as part of the MCU. Don't get me wrong, this had a cliffhanger. It still felt like an episode in a lot of ways, but in terms of like ongoing things, it really does feel like just a sort of a longer movie as opposed to a TV show in some ways. And I think the weird thing about analyzing just, you know, a sixth of the movie is it's easier this first time because everything's new and shiny. But I do wonder if I'm going to have much to say on an episode 2. So this might be one where I just come back at the end of the show and talk about the whole thing, because I struggled some weeks on WandaVision, and I really didn't even bother trying with some of the middle episodes of Falcon and Winter Soldier. So I will see. I'll watch episode 2 next week, and I'll see if I have if I feel I have enough to actually talk about. But you know, I think this episode does a good job of setting up the character to where he is right now, giving him a internal crisis of figuring out who he is and what it means to be him, and that everything he ever has fought for in an evil manner, regardless, is basically worthless here. You know, the Tesseract is a paperweight here, as is the rest of the Infinity Stones. All of it is meaningless, and he has to kind of reconcile that. He has to sort of, okay, what am I without this goal? What am I without this purpose? So that should be an interesting journey, and he does a decent job of, like, you know, having the different crime scenes with Owen Wilson looking for clues, and, you know, seeing that these time anomalies and this variant is traveling through time. You know, I think they're in the 16th century when that first crime scene happens, and then they're in other places later. So a lot going on. It sets stuff up fairly well. It's focused, it doesn't pack in too much. I think all of the nitpicky things you could have are probably, and all the things I nitpicked at for the most part, are less to do with the creation of this show and more to do with some of the cynical, like just having to fit it into the rest of the cinematic universe and making it work so that it functions now where we are as an audience, despite the fact that this Loki's from an earlier part of the timeline. And there's a lot of little things you can be a little cynical about, and I think it's fair to be a little cynical. I think it's fair to be a little jaded. I think ultimately though, if you're enjoying the fun of what's happening, that's not a big deal. And I was probably looking forward to this the least out of the shows that were announced, at least in the first patch. They've announced like 50 more by the time this actually launched, but it's in danger of maybe being my favourite one, just based on little tone things here or there. Obviously Hiddleston's very charming, but the music, the visuals of what this... I don't know if the whole thing's the TVA, but there's that whole city that they see when they come out to the balcony and stuff like that. Like all that stuff I thought was kind of neat. So we'll see. But there you go, that's episode 1 of Loki. I think it's solid. I think it went in fairly quick, and for better or worse, it is not too dense. That probably sounds really insulting, but which is partly why I'm not sure if I'll do week-to-week reviews. I might just come back at the end and talk about the whole thing. But yeah, so let me know what you thought of episode 1 in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get me on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the show and the channel and everything we do here, head over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv. For as little as $1 per month, you can support the show and the content and get some bonuses for your trouble. You can, of course, also head over to MailFuzz Movies for movie podcasts, and that's about it. So thank you very much once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?